The Orlando Magic did not play a perfect game.
That is what should terrify Detroit. Paolo Banchero did not light the gym on fire. Jalen Suggs could not buy a bucket. Orlando's offense had long stretches where it looked stuck, rushed, and uncomfortable.
And the Magic still beat the #1 seed,
94-88, a 3-1 series lead. The 8th seed is now 1 win away from sending the 60-win Detroit Pistons home. That is not just an upset anymore. That is a confidence robbery. Because when an underdog plays amazing and beats you, you can tell yourself, all right, they had their night. They got hot. It happens. But when an underdog plays ugly, misses shots, loses one of its key players late, and still makes you look uncomfortable, that is when the room gets quiet. That is where Detroit is right now.
The scary part about Game 4 is not just that Orlando won.
The scary part is how Orlando won. They did not win because everything went perfectly. They did not win because Paolo became Superman. They did not win because Detroit had no talent on the floor. They won because they made the Pistons look unsure of themselves. Detroit did not just lose a game. Detroit lost its rhythm, its spacing, its comfort, its confidence. Orlando did not beat Detroit with beauty. They beat Detroit by stealing its nerve. And when you are the #1 seed, when you won 60 games, when your whole season has been built around the idea that your young core has finally arrived, that kind of loss follows you back to the hotel. This was supposed to be Cade Cunningham's arrival series. The Pistons were supposed to walk into this matchup as the grown-up in the room, the team with the better record, the cleaner identity, the home court advantage, the star guard ready to announce himself as the future of the Eastern Conference. And now they are one loss away from becoming the wrong kind of playoff story. Because Orlando does not look like a normal 8 seed. They had to go through the play-in just to get here. But watching this series, it almost feels like somebody filed the paperwork wrong. This does not look like a team that barely got invited to the party. This looks like a team that walked in late, took the best seat in the room, and asked why everybody else was standing. That is the energy Orlando is playing with. They are not acting lucky. They are not acting surprised. They are playing like a team that believes they have found the formula. And the formula is simple. Make the game ugly. Make Cade work. Make Duren think. Make Detroit's role players hesitate. Then, when the game gets tight, trust that Orlando is more comfortable in the mud than Detroit is. That was Game 4. A slow, stressful, low-scoring playoff game where nothing came easy and every mistake felt twice as loud. And that is Orlando's world. The Magic are not trying to win a beauty contest. They are trying to make the game feel heavy. And Detroit is feeling that weight. You could see it in the turnovers. 20 turnovers for the Pistons. In a game that ended 94-88, that is not a small detail. That is a wound. A missed shot is one thing. You can live with missed shots. It happens. The playoffs are physical. Legs get tired, hands get tight. But turnovers are different. Turnovers feel like panic. Turnovers feel like a team trying to solve a problem too quickly. Turnovers feel like the defense has gotten inside your head. And that is exactly what Orlando has done. They are not just defending Detroit's shots. They are defending Detroit's confidence. Every catch feels pressured. Every drive feels crowded. Every passing lane feels like a trap. Cade Cunningham sees one defender in front of him, another defender shading over, a third defender sitting near the nail, and suddenly, what used to be a normal read in January feels like a final exam in April. That is how playoff defense changes a series. It does not just take away your first option. It makes your second option slower. It makes your third option nervous. It makes everybody think. And once a team starts thinking instead of reacting, the defense has already won half the possession. Cade still fought. Let's be clear about that. Cade Cunningham did not disappear. He gave Detroit 25 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists. He kept trying to organize the offense. He kept trying to calm possessions down. He kept trying to create when the floor was crowded and nothing felt clean. But there is a difference between having numbers and having control. Cade had numbers. Orlando had control. That is the painful truth of this game. Because every time Cade tried to create, it looked hard. Not impossible, but hard. Too hard. Every bucket felt like he had to pull it out of a locked box. That is not sustainable. Your star can carry you through stretches. Your star can win you possessions. Your star can make something out of nothing. But if your entire offense becomes, Cade, please make something out of nothing again, eventually the bill comes due. And in Game 4, the bill came due in the fourth quarter. The Pistons needed one clean stretch, one calm stretch, one moment where the #1 seed said, enough, we are taking this game back. They never found it. Tobias Harris gave them 20 points, and that mattered. Tobias was one of the few Detroit players who looked like he understood the temperature of the game. He did not rush everything. He did not look shocked by the contact. He gave them veteran buckets when the offense needed oxygen. But Tobias scoring 20 cannot be your entire safety blanket. Detroit needed its identity. And the biggest symbol of Detroit losing that identity is Jalen Duren. All season, Duren gave the Pistons force. He was the vertical threat, the lob target, the second chance machine, the guy who made Cade's pick-and-roll game feel simple. When Duren is rolling hard, the defense has to make painful choices. Step up on Cade and Duren is behind you. Stay attached to Duren and Cade gets space. Send help from the corner and Detroit gets a clean kickout. That is how an offense breathes. But in this series, Orlando has taken that simplicity away. They are meeting Duren early. They are crowding his catches. They are making him catch the ball in places where he has to think instead of explode. And when Duren has to think, Orlando has already won half the possession. Regular season Duren looked like a monster truck. Right now, Orlando has him stuck in airport traffic. That line is funny, but the problem is serious. Because if Duren is not bending the defense vertically, Cade's life becomes harder. If Cade's life becomes harder, Detroit shooters get worse looks. If the shooters get worse looks, the floor gets tighter. If the floor gets tighter, the turnovers rise. Everything is connected. That is why Orlando's defensive plan has been so damaging. They are not just beating one matchup. They are pulling on one thread and watching the whole sweater come loose. And it is not like Orlando played flawless offense on the other end. That is what makes this even more painful for Detroit. Paolo Banchero finished with 18 points and 8 rebounds. Solid, important, but not some legendary masterpiece. He did not shoot Detroit out of the building, but he kept pressure on him. Paolo's value in this kind of game is not only about efficiency, it is about gravity. Every time he catches the ball, Detroit has to care. They have to load up. They have to send help. They have to worry about him getting downhill, drawing fouls, kicking out, or using his size to bully a smaller defender. Even when the jumper is not falling, Paolo makes the defense react. And that reaction creates stress. Then Franz Wagner gave Orlando exactly what Franz Wagner usually gives you: quiet damage. 19 points, 4 steals. He is not always loud. He is not always dramatic, but he keeps showing up in the exact places the opponent hates. A timely drive, a smart cut, a deflection, a steal, a possession where he makes the right read without making it look difficult. And before he left with right calf soreness, he was one of Orlando's most reliable players. That injury could have been the moment Detroit took control. You are the #1 seed. You are fighting for your life. Orlando's steady wing leaves the game. The offense on the other side is already ugly. This is the window. This is when the favorite is supposed to punish the underdog. But Detroit never really did. Instead, Jamal Cain stepped into the gap and gave Orlando exactly the kind of chaotic role player energy that wins playoff games. 8 points, 10 rebounds, and more importantly, he gave them force. Not superstar force. Not run the offense through me force. The other kind. The crash the glass, fly into the frame, make a play nobody planned for kind. That is how playoff games swing. Sometimes it is not the star who changes the feeling. Sometimes it is the guy who was not supposed to be the story, jumping into the middle of the game and making the favorite look uncomfortable. That is what Cain did it.
And that dunk through Duren?
That was not just 2 points. That was a message. A role player attacking your young center at the rim in a game where your season is starting to wobble, that stuff matters. It affects the building. It affects body language. It becomes a clip. It becomes a feeling.
Orlando kept landing those little emotional punches.
Wendell Carter Jr. landed his own kind too.
He was not putting up some crazy scoring line, but his 11 rebounds and 2 blocks mattered because Orlando needed physical stability. They needed somebody to help hold the paint together, somebody to make sure Detroit did not turn missed shots into easy second chances.
Nothing fancy, just useful.
And in an ugly playoff game, useful can be beautiful. Then there is Desmond Bane. Bane was the one piece Orlando absolutely needed because he gave them something clean inside the mess.
22 points, 5 rebounds, 5 threes.
In a game like this, that kind of shooting is oxygen.
When everybody else is wrestling in the mud, Bane is the guy who can still step into a 3 like the floor is normal. And the context made it even better.
Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. were sitting courtside, watching their former Memphis teammate work.
You cannot have Ja and JJJ in the building and put up cardio numbers.
That group chat would be undefeated.
So Bane gave Orlando adult shot making in a game that desperately needed it. And that mattered most in the final 2 minutes.
Because the end of this game is where Detroit's confidence really cracked.
With 1:35 left, Cade Cunningham gets to the free throw line.
This is what stars are supposed to do when the game gets ugly.
You cannot find clean offense. The floor is tight. Nobody is breathing right. Fine. Get downhill. Take contact. Stop the clock. Cade splits the pair. Now Detroit is down 3. Still alive. Still right there. One stop, one bucket, and suddenly the entire game changes. This is the moment where the favorite can still rescue itself. Then Desmond Bane banks in a 3. Not swishes, banks. And there is something uniquely painful about a banked 3 in a playoff game. A normal 3 hurts.
A banked 3 feels personal.
It feels like the basketball gods looked at Detroit and said, "Not tonight." That shot pushed Orlando's lead to 6 with 1:16 left. But it did more than change the score. It changed the feeling. Before that shot, Detroit was chasing. After that shot, Detroit looked like it was running out of belief. The Pistons still had time. They still had chances. But the offense did not look calm. It looked rushed. It looked tight. It looked like a team trying to find a door in a room that was getting smaller. Osar Thompson had a floater blocked. Cade got a 3-point look and missed. Paolo grabbed a huge rebound with under 34 seconds left.
And every one of those moments felt like Orlando tightening the rope.
That final stretch told the whole story. Detroit did not need a miracle for most of the night. They just needed clean basketball. But Orlando never let them have it. That is why this 94-88 score is so dangerous. On paper, it looks close. Emotionally, it felt like Orlando owned the end of the game. They owned the pressure. They owned the ugly. They owned the moments where Detroit was supposed to remind everyone why it was the #1 seed. And that is why Game 5 becomes so much bigger than a normal elimination game. This is not only about adjustments. It is about belief. Does Detroit still believe it is the better team? That is the real question now. Because when a 1 seed goes down 3-1 to an 8 seed, the basketball part is only half the problem. The other half is psychological. Every missed shot feels louder. Every turnover feels heavier. Every Orlando run feels like the season's slipping. Every quiet possession from Duren becomes a bigger story. Every Cade drive becomes a referendum on whether he can save the whole thing. That is a brutal place to play from. And Orlando knows it. The Magic are going into Game 5 with house money and confidence. That is a dangerous combination. They are not playing like a team trying to survive anymore. They are playing like a team trying to finish the job. That is a huge difference. A team trying to survive plays nervous. A team trying to finish plays with purpose. Orlando has purpose right now.
They know the formula.
Keep the game physical. Crowd Cade. Make Duren uncomfortable. Force Detroit's role players to make quick decisions. Protect the ball. Survive the ugly stretches. Trust Bane to hit enough shots. Trust Paolo's pressure. Trust Wendell to hold the paint. Trust the role players to bring energy.
That is a real plan.
Detroit needs one too. And Cade save us cannot be the whole plan. That is not fair to Cade, and it is not enough against this kind of defense. The Pistons need to make the game easier for him. They need earlier offense. They need cleaner spacing. They need ways to get Cade catching the ball with movement already happening, instead of asking him to create from a standing start against a set defense.
They need Duren involved as a finisher, not as a decision maker in a crowd.
They need Tobias Harris to keep giving them calm buckets. They need Osar Thompson's energy without letting the floor get too cramped.
And most importantly, they need way fewer turnovers.
Because 20 turnovers in Game 5 might end the season.
That is not dramatic.
That is just math.
If Detroit gives Orlando that many extra chances again, the Magic will not care if the game is ugly. They like ugly. They live there now. That is what makes this matchup so fascinating.
The regular season told us Detroit was the better team. This series is asking if Detroit is the better team under stress.
Those are not the same question. And Orlando is built to ask that question over and over again. Can you score when the first action is gone?
Can you trust your role players when Cade is crowded?
Can Duren still be a force when the lob is not clean?
Can your offense stay calm when the whistle, the crowd, and the score all start pressing on your chest?
Can your 60-win identity survive a team that does not care about your resume?
That is what Orlando is doing. They are not respecting Detroit's regular season. They are testing Detroit's playoff nerve.
And so far, Detroit has not answered loudly enough.
Now, to be fair, this series is not over.
The Pistons are not dead. They still have Cade Cunningham. They still have home court for Game 5. They still have the talent to win one game and make this series feel completely different.
That is the thing about 3-1.
It feels impossible until the favorite wins one game.
Then suddenly, it is 3-2. Pressure shifts a little, and everybody starts remembering that the team down in the series actually won 60 games. So Detroit is not finished.
But they are absolutely in danger.
Real danger. Because Orlando has already shown that this is not a fluke. One game can be weird. 2 games can be momentum.
3 wins in 4 games?
That is a pattern. And the pattern says Orlando is more comfortable playing this version of basketball than Detroit is. That is what has to scare Pistons fans.
Not just the score,
the comfort level.
Orlando looks comfortable when the game is ugly.
Detroit looks like it is trying to escape the ugliness.
That difference can decide a series. Because if Orlando wins one more game, this becomes one of those playoff stories people bring up for years. The 8 seed that knocked off the 1 seed.
The play-in team that did not look like a play-in team. The favorite that won 60 games and still could not solve the matchup in front of it.
That is legacy danger. That is the kind of loss that turns a beautiful regular season into a punchline.
And that is why Game 5 is not just another game.
It is the moment where Detroit either remembers who it is or Orlando finishes taking that identity away.
For Cade Cunningham, this is the biggest test of his young career.
Not because he has to score 40. Maybe he does. Maybe he does not.
But because he has to make Detroit feel stable again. He has to make the Pistons believe the game is not slipping away every time Orlando pressures the ball. He has to make the simple play, trust the pass, pick his spots, control the pace, stop the emotional bleeding. That is what franchise players do. But the rest of Detroit has to show up with him.
Duren has to give them force. Tobias has to give them calm.
The shooters have to fire with hesitation. The defense has to get stops without giving Orlando easy second chances. And most importantly, Detroit has to play like a team that still believes it is the #1 seed. because right now, Orlando believes.
That is obvious. You can see it in how they defend. You can see it in how they crash the glass. You can see it in how Bane takes that late three. You can see it in how role players like Kane step into big minutes without blinking.
Orlando believes the upset is real.
Detroit has one game to remind them it is not over.
And after Game 4, the warning is loud. The Magic did not need to be perfect.
They just needed Detroit to be uncomfortable.
That is the part that should keep the Pistons up at night. Because if Orlando can shoot ugly, lose rhythm, lose Franz late, and still win,
then Game 5 is not about hoping the Magic cool off.
they already cooled off.
Detroit still lost. So now the question is much harder.
Can the Pistons get their confidence back?
Can they play with force instead of fear?
Can they stop turning every possession into a puzzle? Can Duran become a weapon again?
Can Cade get help before he runs out of answers?
That is the series now.
And honestly, this is why the playoffs are brutal.
They do not just reveal who is talented.
They reveal who can stay themselves when somebody is trying to take that identity away. Right now, Orlando is taking Detroit's identity away one possession at a time. And the Pistons have one game to take it back.
So I want to know what you think.
Are the Magic actually this dangerous, or are the Pistons choking away a series they should have controlled?
And if you are Detroit, what is the first adjustment for Game 5? Do you force feed Jalen Duran early to wake up the paint pressure?
Do you put more shooting around Cade and live with a defensive trade-off? Do you change how you guard Paolo and Bane?
Or is the real problem simpler than that? Orlando has gotten into Detroit's head.
Because after Game 4, that feels like the real story. Orlando did not just beat Detroit. They made Detroit doubt itself. And now Game 5 will tell us whether the #1 seed still has another gear,
Or whether the 8 seed has already written the ending.